You're an expert on content consumption. You've watched thousands of hours of TV shows, cartoons, movies, flash animations, FMVs, vlogs, visual podcasts, snaps, vines, web series, how-tos, instas, TikToks, and even multi-part YouTube documentary series. You've watched them on televisions, movie screens, computer monitors, cable, Betamax, VHS, laserdiscs, HD televisions, home projectors, DVDs, Blu-ray discs, streaming, laptops, tablets, cell phone, airplane seats, sides of buses, gas station pumps, and I'm talking strictly narratives filmed with a camera at some level. There's also video games, theme park rides, the theater, and we're still just talking about visual media. There's also radio, podcasts, zoetropes, magazines, newspapers, comics, manga, books, just regular books. You have seen more media content in your life than your great-grandparents ever did. You've probably seen more content than even your parents, who may still be consuming content right now with no hope of ever catching up to you. And your own kids will likely see even more than you. Now, don't sell yourself short, because even if you don't realize it, you're also an expert at content creation. Ever since Kevin Smith showed us that technology was available for just some guy to make a movie, the floodgates opened. There's enough camera technology on you right now to make a movie, or a TV show, or just a social media post, and you've likely dabbled in some or all of these formats. So why don't we care about good content anymore? When we are presented with information, like a narrative for example, our brains send that info to the sensory register of the brain. 100% of the information you take in goes there, which is billions of gigabytes of data. Our brains interpret and organize that information in what's called executive functions. It can send parts of that information to be stored in long-term memory, or it can pull information out of long-term memory to help sort the new information within the working memory. I'm observing a kind of tree I've never seen before, but I also know that it's a tree because I can remember seeing many other trees before. Now when we're born, our brains are small, and then they get bigger as we get older, obviously, but they also gain new executive functions. We receive cognitive flexibility, which allows us to change how we think about something. We develop inhibitory control, or at least I've heard that some people who don't have ADHD are able to practice selective attention and ignore distractions. At a certain point, our parents and teachers start asking us questions like, "What do you think about that?" A toddler cannot answer this question. It just doesn't make sense. Ditto monkeys and dolphins. Maybe you've heard of the phrase from René Descartes, cognito ergo sum, which means I think, therefore I am. This is a unique thing for humans, and maybe it's our defining feature that lets us do all of this. It's our metacognitive ability to think about thinking. Metacognition is traditionally broken down into two categories. There's metacomprehension, which is judging when you understand something. This can be confusing, but if you've got what I'm saying, then you've just done it. Does that make sense? The other is meta-memory, which is what we know about how our memory works. These are trainable skills that get better with practice. They develop around middle childhood, and if you've ever seen competitive memory competitions, this is the skill they are training on. A person who can recite back to you an entire deck of cards doesn't have a better long-term memory than you do, they just have a stronger meta-memory. They know how to put information into their brain in a way that they will be able to easily remember it again later. There's another thing our brains do, something that receives less academic attention and is certainly harder to measure. That thing is called creativity, or imagination. We can watch a movie, we know that it's not real, but we enjoy the story anyway. We may or may not like it, but we understand the concept and aren't confused by the idea that it's a story. We are also able to tell our own stories. They might be an exciting story, like Treasure Island, or they might be a story my mom tells, like that she saw Mrs. Peters from church at the grocery store. I'd like to make up a new word for this thinking about stories, Metacontenta. In Latin it translates to thinking about media content. This is our ability to think about stories using our knowledge of what a story is. For example, we all know my mom told a bad story. You might say, because it was boring. That's true, but you are not flexing your metacontentive muscle. This story is bad because it has no ending. We are introduced to two characters, Mom and Mrs. Peters. They know each other at church. Then Mom leaves the ordinary world of the church and crosses the threshold into the fantastical world of the grocery store. But who should she find there but Mrs. Peters? Oh, did you want more? Why? Do you really care about what happens next? No. The reason a part of you was left hanging is your metacontenta telling you that you know what a story is, and that wasn't it. For thousands of years, we've gotten by on stories having beginnings, middles, and ends. That's a basic three-act structure. And every story from Beowulf to Bayonetta follows it, or at least they used to. Media is changing. The landscape of content is very different every single day, and we don't know where it's headed. So let's talk about how media tells stories. This is the first chapter in a 10-part docuseries on Metacontenta. It covers the democratization of storytelling as we head towards the visual media singularity. I didn't need to tell you that because you already read those words in the title up there when you started watching this video. It's almost like most digital content doesn't need to include an Act 1 anymore, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The series is going to look at entertainment media and break down what stories are being told and how the storyteller achieved that result. It will help you to flex your Metacontenta skills and become a Metacontentative master. It is my belief that you do not need a TV writing degree to understand why entertainment media is failing you. These aren't nitpicks about continuity or plot holes. They are fundamental misunderstandings by showrunners, directors, and influencers to provide you with metacontentatory engagement. Stories need to have characters with agency who do things and face consequences. And it's not too hard to pick up on this with a little practice and training. Here's the breakdown. After this cold open episode, the rest will fall into 3 acts: the past, the present, and the future. Episodes 2, 3, and 4 will cover the history of traditional visual media as it progresses from film to television to internet, respectively. In the present, we will cover the recent history of mixed format media in Episode 5, and Episode 6 will focus on specific recent popular examples to show where this crossover of content is losing parts of the story in the telling. Parts 7, 8, and 9 are about the future of content. We will focus on the concept of content singularity and the internet, then use that understanding to break down the concept of format separate from medium. Then we will redefine what we call content and predict what we'll be watching in the years to come as we reach media transcendence, when there is just media with no format and we are all at all times both creators and consumer. That'll be a trippy one. Episode 10 will be the conclusion. So why is this important? Does this matter? If I can open up for a second, I want to talk about why I take storytelling pretty seriously. The closest thing that I get to having a religious practice is my belief in the monomyth structure of storytelling. This is an idea popularized by Joseph Campbell, who also coined the term hero's journey. There are a lot of books, videos, and college courses out there about the hero's journey, and I'm going to mostly consider that information you as an audience member already have in your Metacontenta repertoire. Like I said before, it boils down to have characters having agency to make decisions with consequences told with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Cogito, ergo, sum. I am not confident that the concept of the monomyth is as ubiquitous as this. Remember when I was talking about the competitive memory championships? There's a trick to doing that. I would recommend reading the book Moonwalking with Einstein by Joshua Foer for more, but in a nutshell, the way those experts are able to recite a list of random words or numbers back with perfect accuracy is by turning the list, which is interchangeable, into a story which has a beginning, middle, and end. It's easier to remember stories than it is to remember facts. I forget how old I am all the time, but I can recite 12 seasons worth of Simpsons episodes. No one remembers the dates they memorized for a grade school history test, but they still might know all the words to American Pie, and maybe even all the words to the Weird Al version about Star Wars. Storytelling is so ingrained in what makes us human and how our memories work that we need to turn things that are not stories into stories just to comprehend them. And we all do it. We're just not aware of it. I understand that I may look at the monomyth more seriously than most, but one of the core tenets is that there is a sacred connection between human beings through our dreams and our imaginations that is expressed through our stories. We speak the same language of archetypes, iconography, and storytelling structure in every culture across every time period. We don't always understand it or think about how we think about stories, but it explains a lot. For example, the snake is a creature found in mythology stories and nightmares everywhere. They have been antagonists in Abrahamic and Sinospheric mythology, and also Indiana Jones films. The snake lies on its belly and is a primordial archetype of an earthly creature. It can never be anything else. These regions also have eagles, doves, and other flying angelic creatures who represent the heavens. Humans are aware that they are stuck on the ground with the snakes, but unlike the snakes, we comprehend heaven. We are aware of duality. The snake lived in the garden, tempting Adam and Eve to learn the knowledge of good and evil, and once they realized they were not allowed to stay, they had evolved from a singular understanding to a dual understanding. They grew up to develop metacognition and mythologized that journey. And because at our core, deep in the monomyth, we all knew about the snakes and the eagles, every disconnected corner of the earth told stories about the magical creatures stuck in the middle with us. Dragons. That's why dragons exist independently of cultures in South America, Asia, and Europe, dating back to before they were aware of each other on a map. We all just told the same story of being stuck between the heaven and the earth. It's important to remember singularity and duality, in a religious and technological sense. As we look at our entertainment media, our stories start singularly. The hero then crosses a threshold into a second special world and becomes aware of duality between them. At the end, they master both worlds and transcend them. They then return to a singular existence as a new being. Because of that pattern, singular, dual, singular, stories have 3 acts. I am one thing, a wrench is thrown in a dramatic crisis, then I eventually solve the problem and go back to where I started, a little smarter than when I left. Technology follows the same pattern. We talk about the AI singularity when there is no difference between human and artificial intelligence. The media content singularity is also approaching, maybe much sooner, when all content is just content and there are no longer differences between movies, TV shows, or YouTube posts. The reason why it's so important to me that we start to think critically about the media we consume is that I am deeply concerned about what will happen to our brains if we forget how to tell a good story. Luckily, it's not too late.